Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me along to speak to you on this lovely hot day. Excuse me, I'm glowing a little bit, but I'll do my best to keep going. So I'm going to talk to you about how does research get into the Assembly, and a sort of subtitle for that is engaging with the policy making and scrutiny process. I've worked for the Assembly for about 16 years now, and I've virtually since the beginning, 1999, when the Assembly was created. I've always worked in the research service, but I was previously one of the team leaders that led the environment team that dealt with briefing members on environment issues. And for the last sort of 18 months or so, I've been doing a slightly different job around developing new services. And one of the areas that I've been leading on is academic engagement. So that is getting academics more involved in the work of the Assembly. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to cover 4 things, or even 5, if I could count. I want to talk about, first of all, what the Assembly is and how it differs from the Welsh Government. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the research service itself, who we are and what we do, and then really to kind of focus in on the importance of academic engagement to the work that we do, and then what I hope will be some sort of practical tips about how academics can get involved with that work and how they can engage with the Assembly. And then I want to sort of finish off by just highlighting a few of some of the new initiatives that we've been working on for the last sort of year, 18 months. In terms of trying to get academics working more closely with us, things like fellowships and secondments and so on. So to start off then with the Assembly and what it is and what it does. So the Assembly is the democratically elected body that represents the interests of Wales and its people, makes laws for Wales and holds the Welsh Government to account. So the first thing to say is that the Assembly is not the same as the Welsh Government. We represent all 60 members who are elected to the Assembly, and obviously the government ministers are part of that body, but the work that we do is supporting the 60 members of the Assembly. By the very nature of it, a lot of the work we do is for the members who are part of the opposition parties, because they want to scrutinise the government and question what it's doing, and as it says, hold it to account. But we do also do work for members of the Labour Party and ministers as well, particularly in relation to their role as individual members representing their constituents and so on. So the research service is a service that exists to help members do their jobs better, really. Basically, we try and ensure that members have access to information that they need to do their jobs, and we assist them in this role of holding the Welsh Government to account and also in representing their constituents. So it's really important that members have access to information that they need in order to better understand public policy. And I quite like the bottom quote as well. These are both quotes from our research service plan. So get your facts first, then you can distort them as you please. And I think particularly in the sort of recent climate of questioning of evidence and what is fact, etc., doing this is even more important. So who are we and what do we do? So we have about 30 people altogether working in the research service. I've got a guide here which I've got 1 or 2 copies of it, but it's also available on the website, and the presentation has got links to it, which hopefully can be shared with you afterwards if you want to have a look. But we have about 30 researchers specialising in the devolved areas that the Assembly deals with, and we're organised into subject teams. And our remit is to be politically impartial, but to produce information to help members do their jobs. And that really sort of falls into 3 main types of work. So first of all, we have an inquiry service, so members can come to us and ask us pretty much anything, and we have to try and find information to help them answer those questions. often at fairly short notice. It can be anything from a week to a few days to, oh, I'm going to say something in plenary this afternoon about this, can you help me? So that's the inquiry service. We also provide support for the Assembly's committees. So the Assembly's committees are a bit like the sort of select committees that the Westminster has, and they do two things. One is that they carry out inquiries into different aspects of policy and hold the government to account. And the second thing they do is scrutinise legislation as it passes through the Assembly. And the research service helps them in that work in terms of producing written briefings and background information for those pieces of work. And the third area that we do is produce proactive outputs. So these are things that we decide or we think will be useful to help members do their jobs better, as opposed to the reactive stuff, which is answering inquiries and responding to committees. So we produce a range of published briefings on different aspects of Welsh government, Welsh policy rather, and we also have a blog, and most of our material is put out now through that blog. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to have a look. In Brief it's called. So we try and make that sort of topical, so it relates to events going on in the Assembly and also to other topical issues, but providing sort of factual, impartial briefing to help members. We also have a library and various sort of online resources, and we do sort of things like mapping as well for members. We also help members if they want to bring forward their own legislation. So if the government introduces a bill, it has the backing of the civil service to take that bill through. But if an individual member wants to introduce a bill into the Assembly, they can do that, but they don't have that same backing, so it falls to us to help them with that process of developing their bill. And of course, everything we operate bilingually. So that's just a sort of a quick infographic that kind of describes all those different areas of service that we provide. So to move on to the theme about why academic engagement is important or vital. I mean, we work in a fast-moving political environment, and we need basically we need the information quickly, but we need that information to be reliable, and we need it to be evidence-based. We also, there's new issues cropping up all the time where we may lack the expertise. Although we have about 30 staff, we have to cover, as I said, all the policy areas that the Assembly can deal with. So, for example, our environment team has one researcher who sort of specialises in energy. So that person can't possibly know everything there is to know about energy and energy policy. So we really need external expertise to help us when we're trying to brief members and answer their questions. We also need access to sort of research from further afield. And also I think it's quite important for developing our own staff that they have contacts with expertise external to the service and can help them develop their own expertise that way. And really it's providing this sort of bridge between academic research and policy. And I know a big thing for academics is that doing this work helps academics to demonstrate that the work they're doing is having impact for the purposes of the ref. So just to kind of talk about a few areas where we academics can engage and how they can do that. I mean, I think the most important message is about just really getting in touch with us and letting us know that you're there and what your expertise is. I've been doing quite a lot of work talking to people like impact managers around the Welsh universities and trying to get hold of information about what particular academics are working on and what their expertise is, but it's quite difficult to get a complete picture of what, and particularly when something crops up at short notice, we need to find somebody quickly. Doing that is difficult, so people coming to us and telling us about work that they're doing and what their expertise is really helpful. Also, if you want to kind of keep up to date with what Assembly members themselves are interested in, so what's being debated in the Assembly, and what are the topical issues, I mean, you can do that by looking at the website and following it on SNF TV, which is the live broadcast of the Assembly. I mean, making your research as accessible as possible and sort of available to a non-academic audience, I think is really important. And also finally, sort of you can get involved in some of the new initiatives that we're working on, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail now. There's a few more sort of things about how to engage. So I mentioned already looking at the website, signing up for the blog. We've got a Twitter account, so SNF Research is our Twitter handle or feed or whatever title, whatever it's called. And also I think through the Assembly's committees. So there's various ways that you can get involved in committee work. One of those is that committees will put out calls for evidence. So when they decide to do a policy inquiry in a particular area, they will publish a call for evidence, and academics can and often do sort of submit their written evidence to those inquiries, and they will then be considered as part of the evidence base for that piece of work. Sometimes people will then be called in as well to give evidence to a committee, so give oral evidence, and that's often on the basis of the written evidence that they've submitted previously. Also, sometimes committees will take on expert advisors to work with on a particular inquiry, so they will sort of support behind the scenes the work of that particular committee inquiry as it progresses. There's also a committee newsletter which is published, again there's a link to it in here, so that sort of tells you about all the work that committees have got planned over the coming few months, and both the policy scrutiny and also the legislation that we're going to be looking at. And finally, there's also an expert advisors database as well, which people can register with. So the idea of that is that you can make your expertise known to us, and then if we have a particular requirement for that expertise, we can get your name from the database. So just a few pictures of things. So that's the Assembly's website, if you don't already know it. That's its address. This is the In Brief blog that I mentioned. So on average we post probably about 4 or 5 articles a week on there about things that are going on during the time when the Assembly is sitting anyway. Also, the Research Service has its own pages on the Assembly's website, so there's links there to the guide, and there's also copies of the various publications that we produce and a lot of other information as well about the Research Service. That's the guide. That's the newsletter, which is published about once every term, which basically tells you what each committee is going to be working on. And that's the expert advisor database that I mentioned. Okay, so just to kind of finish off with talking a bit about some of the new academic engagement initiatives that we've been developing over the last year or so. So I've been sort of working on this quite closely with my counterparts as well in Scotland, Northern Ireland and the House of Commons. So we've been looking at sort of best practice in terms of academic engagement in other parts of the UK, and sort of sharing ideas. So some of these ideas are also being done in other parts of the UK, but we're doing them in a slightly different way in Wales. And we're doing things on a kind of pilot basis as well, so to sort of try them out and see if they work. And then what we plan to do is produce a more sort of formal academic engagement plan for the Assembly, and then sort of take some of those initiatives forward on a more permanent basis. So a fellowship scheme, secondments, we're running seminars for members as well, something called the Evidence Information Service, and finally sort of awareness events. So this is one of those type of events. So just quickly I'll run through a bit of information about each of those. So the fellowship scheme, first of all, the idea of this is that a senior academic will come in and work alongside us in the research service, or potentially with one of our committees, and provide support and expertise to help us prepare members for the piece of work that they're doing. We set up 3 so far, 2 actually with Bangor University and 1 with Cardiff University. We've got a 4th one which we're discussing at the moment with Aberystwyth, and there's another one with Swansea, which is on the cards as well. So we're trying to sort of set up a handful of these to sort of try them out in various different sort of policy areas, and then we're going to kind of evaluate the outcome of that, and as I mentioned, sort of possibly look to sort of launch it as a more formal scheme. So if we launch it as a more formal scheme, there will be a sort of a formal application process for academics to apply to do a fellowship, and we will sort of produce a list of the kind of topic areas that we want academics with expertise to apply for. But so far, the experience so far is it seems to be sort of a thing that's a mutual benefit, because the academics get a lot out of it in terms of policy engagement and understanding how the political process works, but also we're getting their expertise as well to help us. We also take on PhD interns for 3 monthly placements. So actually the scheme for next year has just been launched this week. So we work with other parts of the UK, the other parliamentary organisations, in terms of selecting students, and then they come and spend a 3-month placement with us down in the Bay, and across all the different research councils, and we've got about between 8 and 10 places available for that scheme for next year. And again, the sort of feedback from the students who've been through it previously is always really positive, because they find it a very beneficial way of learning about policy making and policy and scrutiny, as well as how to deal with a very different kind of working environment to what they used to do as well. Seminars. So on this, we've been working with the Learned Society of Wales, and we're doing it on a pilot basis, but we've set up 3 seminars so far on different topics. The idea of this is to bring academics into the Assembly and to talk to Assembly members, away from the sort of the normal sort of political debate of formal plenary or committees, basically to sort of expose them to new ideas and new thinking. And we came up with the overall theme of sort of how ambitious Welsh policy should be in different aspects. And we've already done one about the economy. We've got one about civil society next week, and then there's one on energy in July. And we've also been experimenting with different timings and different venues. We've also, the first couple were only sort of internal events, but the third one on energy policy, we're going to have that as a sort of wider stakeholder event. So we're going to be doing quite a lot of publicity and social media about it, and encouraging people to come along, just to kind of test out the different models really and see what works. And again, if that's successful, we're likely to sort of launch it as a sort of ongoing series later in the year. Northern Ireland have been doing a similar series to this for about 3 or 4 years now, and certainly the experience for the first one was very positive. We had quite a few Assembly members came along and found it really useful. That's just copies of the booklet for the seminar series. Just going to mention one other thing. Is mention this point about how we quickly find expertise when we need it at short notice. So there's a group of academics based, well, some of them are in Cardiff and the other GW4 universities, who came up with this idea of trying to find a matchmaking service, as they called it. So sort of trying to link up academics with politicians, and they carried out a survey of members of Parliament and asked them about the idea. And they said it was really good, but you need to work alongside the existing support services that we have, so the House Commons Library or the research service in the case of the Assembly. So they sort of revised their plans a little bit, and they employed a sort of a research associate to kind of develop this idea of how such a sort of matchmaking service should work. And she spent some time with us. She's also been around House Commons and Scotland and Northern Ireland as well to see how their various services work. And it's really to sort of see how academic input, well, 2 things: how we can quickly find academic expertise when we need it, and secondly, how that then sort of adds value to the kind of information we would have provided to members. And we'll probably end up with some sort of database set up for which will allow that to sort of project to go forward. So that's all I was going to say. As I said, if a copy of the slides can be made available, I've included links in there to all the various things that I referred to. Okay, thank you very much.